So, first of all, great job, Amy and Arno. That's fantastic. You're doing great work. You know, I really enjoyed that presentation. And thank you, Amy and Hatch and your entire team for putting together this event. This is fantastic. I'm so excited to be here in Monterey. I've never been here before. And this is a beautiful community. And I think it's really fabulous that the city has stood up and said, hey, we want to be a part of this. We want to support this local vesting movement, which I think is incredibly, incredibly powerful and important. So who am I? Yep, I'm the co-founder CEO of Crowdfunding Media Group. We're the publishers of Crowdfunding Insider. Please go there and read that. If you want to get a hold of me, you know, please email me. I have my email at the end. I go to a lot of these events that attack or address the crowdfunding and fintech sector from various angles. I'm also officially an advisor to the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance. So we look at things from a global perspective because I think it's important to look and compare and contrast with what is working elsewhere, not just within the United States. It's a really, really fascinating space globally, not just domestically within the United States. So I'm going to start with Reg D 506C. Amy knows I love all the jargon. I don't really, but I always get stuck into it because, you know, that's how other people within the industry refer to it. And so I think it's important to have an understanding of this. And this is a slide that I think she removed twice. She pulled it out twice, and I kept saying, no, you've got to put this in there because it's part of the ecosystem. People need to understand this because this is important. So Reg D is a huge exemption. It's what Uber uses to raise their money. They go out to the really rich people and say, hey, do you want to buy some shares? They say, sure, and they write them a check for $100 million. And everybody goes away happy. It's big money. The SEC guesses that last year, using Reg D private placements, they raised $1.68 trillion. Now that's, when you start talking trillions, that's a lot of money. But even then, the SEC doesn't really know how much they're raising because the way the exemption is set up, they just need to file once and say, well, we just sold a little bit here, but they never have to do a closing filing to say actually how much money they raised. So it could be even bigger than that. But what the Jobs Act did is they added this whole 506C thing here to confuse us, which allowed people to generally solicit. So in SEC speak, that means advertise. So in the real world, that means you can go online, you can promote this offering, you can sell securities to people who are accredited investors. And a lot of people are not accredited investors. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute because that's kind of the crucial key here as to why I wanted that slide up here. There are some platforms that are doing what I would call side-by-side offerings where they're pairing Reg CF with Reg D 506C. So it's kind of important to at least understand that. There we go. So Reg A plus, this one's picking up steam. It started off kind of, you know, slowly, but what the SEC did is they took an exemption that didn't work at all anywhere ever. It was like in you know, the land of unfortunate securities exemptions because nobody used it because every time you use it, you had to go to every single state you wanted to sell securities and ask for the blessing of the state securities regulators. And the states really love that. They love the fact that you have to go there and bend your knee and say, please, mother, may I sell my securities in your states? And a lot of the states said, no, we're not going to let you. In fact, when Apple went to do their IPO, and this is a long time ago, at that time they had to go to the different states and ask permission, and Apple was denied in several states, believe it or not. So you have a lot of, you know, perspectives in the world of securities regulators. But Reg A Plus has been described as a mini IPO type exemption where anybody can invest, both accredited and non-accredited investors. So crowdfunding platforms are saying, yay, we can do this and use this to raise money for early stage and smaller companies and also include non-accredited investors. That's important. So out of the gate, of course, the attorneys and the CPAs, they're like, well, what's this? We don't understand this. You know, we don't like change. Everything's working fine for us as it is. You know, don't bother me. I don't want to support this. So the industry started out really slowly because attorneys and CPAs don't like change. But that is, they're starting to come around. Initially, it was a lot of real estate, because for real estate offerings, Reg A Plus, which you can raise up to $50 million, now you're talking about a lot more money, it seems to work well for real estate platforms. But now what you're seeing some of these issuers are starting to figure it out and say, well, wait a minute, I can do this, and because of the way the securities is written, I can go and list my shares immediately on NASDAQ, NYSE, or OTC markets. In fact, Elio Motors, an issuer who's not doing very well, was the first one to go through that path, and they trailblazed a lot of the challenges and hurdles to make it easier for companies to follow. If you look at this Automani company here, this bus, they provide electric motors to transition traditional like fleet vehicles to electric vehicles, which is kind of cool, and that's what they did. And so they raised, they sold shares at like $5 a shares, and now they're trading at $12 a shares on NASDAQ, I believe. So they actually did really well. And so that was and that was a great vehicle for them to raise, a few $1 million, which was excellent. So that one's starting to pick up steam. And then there's Reg CF. And Reg CF was the securities exemption that got a lot of the initial interest because it was called regulation crowdfunding, and that's because that's the way the Congress called it. We have shortened that, of course, to Reg CF, and it's growing kind of slowly. Amy's already talked a little bit about this, but there's been about 44 million raised in these securities, successfully raised. There's more that's inbound, for about 140 raises from the various funding portals. And to be a funding portal, you have to go and ask for the SEC and FINRA's blessing. And so there's about 29 of these FINRA-approved funding portals. One was kicked out because it was pretty scammy, and it should never have been approved, but hey, I'm glad it's gone. And most of these issuers that are listing on these platforms, they're smaller business, and they're smaller businesses that are looking to raise money from a community, and a lot of them are doing okay, are doing fairly well. You're seeing people that are looking to raise $50,000, $100,000. The max raise right now is $1,070,000. It's currently dominated by a handful of platforms: WeFunder, Start Engine, Indiegogo's MicroVentures, and NextSeed. NextSeed, Youngrose, I think he's here. If he's not here, he's going to be later at some point in time. He has a really cool platform that everybody should be certain to listen to because they're really doing a fantastic job. Broker-dealers are allowed to do this too, but they really haven't touched it because they can't make any money. And you're seeing, and that's, you kind of understand it, you're seeing people issue equity, debt, convertibles, revenue share, which is kind of cool. And then there's safes, and safes is a bit of a controversial type of security. It's a Y Combinator creation that allows a company to offer an investor to have the option to buy shares at a later date at discount, and the SEC hates it. A lot of people hate it, but a lot of platforms are using it for better or for worse. Interest rate. So interest rate is kind of cool. And the reason it's kind of cool is because it was mentioned earlier that the Jobs Act was signed into law in 2012, and the SEC hated it, and they didn't want to create the rules, so they dragged their feet, kicking and screaming and crying and whining. They just didn't want to do it. So in the interim, many states started their own process. And so today, I believe we have, as of August, we have 36 states with different exemptions where you can raise money online. And typically, you have to be a business that operates in that state or have the majority of your operations in that state. And typically, you need to be an individual that lives in that state to invest in the company. But there are a lot of differences. It's not like everybody said, well, let's all get together, hold hands, and create the same exemption. That doesn't work. That's not how we operate in this country. And obviously, some of these state exemptions are better than others, and some of them are better than Reg CF. So in Illinois, you can raise up to $5 million. That's kind of a good amount of money for an early stage company, and it's actually kind of in line with what you're seeing more on the coasts for an early stage issuer looking to raise money. So it kind of makes more sense. But That being said, that entire ecosystem in industry is growing slowly. A lot of it has to do with awareness or lack of awareness, and the fact that it's very, very young. So where are we going? So Reg D 506C, the big reason I brought that back is because there continues to be a push in Congress to change the definition of an accredited investor. And I think the definition of the accredited investor today is utterly wrong and ridiculous, because what it does, it says you need to earn at least $200,000 a year or have $1 million in the bank, and you can't count your home as part of your wealth. So they're saying that, well, if you're rich, you got to be smart. And so the belief there is that if you're not rich, you're an idiot. And I'm sorry, that's not the case. You can have a securities attorney that's teaching at Ohio State that doesn't make $200,000 a year. That's a fact. I will tell you that a former securities commissioner, Dan Gallagher, he told me that for most of his career at the SEC, he was not considered an accredited investor. That's ridiculous. Here's the guy who's writing the securities laws, and he's not allowed to invest. So our policy mandarins in Washington, D.C. have a tendency to have a disconnect with reality. And occasionally somebody will say, we need to change this. And occasionally I get some hope that it's actually going to take place. And I've got my fingers crossed that this coming cycle will be the year that they will change that, and they'll create a sophistication qualification. If they create a sophistication qualification for Reg D 506C, that means that anybody that takes a test, perhaps, will be able to participate in these offerings. And the reason everybody uses Reg D 506C is because it's bloody simple to do. I could fill out the form and file it with the SEC, and if I can do it, anybody can do it. And so think about that. That potentially could be very powerful. So for any of you here that speaks with your congressman or senator, please tell them they need to change this, because otherwise, anytime throughout history you have disenfranchised one segment of society to the benefit of another, it hasn't worked out well. And that is what, in fact, is happening, because so many of people raising money in private placements, and the majority of people are just cut out from that. So jumping back to Reg CF, there's a bunch of problems with Reg CF. It's very prescriptive. They created a lot of rules because they're like, oh my God, the sky's going to fall, cats are going to sleep with dogs, and my mother's going to get fleeced, but from some shyster. She's going to buy that swampland, right? They're all out there buying swampland, right? Well, of course that's not happening, but so they put in all these different rules here to create all these hurdles, which has made it more difficult for people to raise money under Reg CF, which is unfortunate. So there are some people in the House and the Senate who believe these should be fixed, but there's not a lot of agreement in Capitol Hill, surprise, surprise. But some of the discussion is in increasing that cap to say 5 million, 10 million. In the UK, you can raise up to 5 million euros, long story there, before you have to file a prospectus. And a prospectus is a huge speed bump. So that's kind of their cap in the UK. They have a single exemption here. They don't do this Reg D, Reg CF, Reg A plus garbage that we somehow have manifested here in the United States. Who knows? There's a trap there. If you're a company, small company, that you're starting to do well, but all of a sudden you have $25 million in assets. So if you're maybe a successful restaurant chain, and you have 2,000 shareholders of record, you have to become a public company the way it stands right now. Surprise, that means you have to go, file all these reports, and that's a huge trap, because there's a huge cost to that. That needs to be fixed. Creating an SPV, special purpose vehicle, I'm not going to get into the minutia there, but there's a lot of people that want that because there's a concern for promising early stage companies that may want to take bigger money later on from VC capital, and that they're going to run away because there's too many people on the cap table. But that's a big issue too. Reg A plus, actually I think that's probably the one that's working the best, at least is how it was envisioned right now. They do have Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 is up to $20 million. Very few people are using it. Most people are doing Tier 2. There is some discussions about pushing that amount higher. There's also a discussion about, there's a bill in the House and Senate about allowing reporting companies to use that too, but that's not really important here. And then there's initial coin offerings. And everybody's heard about initial coin offerings. Yes. I mean, this is the huge hotness, right? The new shiny, where all I have to do is like create digital tokens and go to sell it to the masses, and I'm going to raise $200 million in a week, and some people are doing that. That's kind of crazy. But the reason I mention that is because the SEC has made a statement that they're going to regulate them under Reg D, Reg CF, and Reg A+. So you may see some, more people actually using this, because regulation or understanding the rules can be a good thing. Of course, it helps if the rules are good, but you're going to see more and more ICOs going forward the way it stands now. And then interstate. Interstate, the states love this because the states want control. The states hated Reg CF and they hated Reg A+ so much they sued the SEC. So that was a big hate. They lost in court. Unfortunately for the states. So now they're saying, okay, what do we have to do next? So some of them are talking about maybe creating regional offerings and regional exemptions, which would be kind of interesting, and I think there's merit to that. What do we need? Regulators need to understand that rules need to work for everybody, not just them. It needs to work for the issuers. The issuers need to be able to raise money effectively, without having to, kill yourself to do it. Investors, these need to be good companies that are raising money that you are interested in supporting. And platforms. If platforms aren't engaged in an ecosystem where they can actually make a profit, they're not going to want to do this so much. And so I think you need to take a holistic view at the entire emerging crowdfunding ecosystem, and it has to work for everybody. And if it's not working for everybody, then one of the legs on the stool comes off and it doesn't work. We need education, obviously, because honestly, a lot of people don't even know what I'm talking about. When I am out in public, in a social event, I tell people what I'm doing, they look at me and they have no idea what I'm talking about. It happens all the time. I'm going to become an introvert. And we need support, like ComCap. What Amy and her people are doing here right now is super important. The fact that she was driving all over the West, trying to explain this to people, we need more of that. And it's because it is going to take time. For a robust ecosystem, accountability, credibility, and transparency. One of the things about raising capital online is you can see it and you can understand it. And if people are being accountable and credible, that's a good thing. Frequently, traditional banking likes to look at new forms of finance and say, they're shadow banking. They're the bad guys. They're looking in the shadows. They're doing something that nobody knows what they're doing. Actually, the opposite is kind of true, because the online guys like to put everything out there so you know everything that is going on, and then you eliminate an element of counterparty risk. It's really the traditional banks that are shadow banks, but they don't like to hear that. Over time, the industry is going to be judged on its effectiveness, and that means it needs to be effective for those three different constituents. And also, investors are going to want to see some sort of possibility for a return on the investment, mostly. And profitability, I think it's a necessity for sustainability. That's how you keep a sustainable ecosystem. Risk, the regulators always look at it from a risk perspective because that's their mission, that's their goal. Investor protection, that's what we have to do. Enforcement, let's go get these guys because they're bad. But that's fraud. Fraud is a bad thing. Nobody wants fraud. But risk is okay. There's a certain element to risk in investing. That's how it works. It's called capitalism. There has been one case of fraud in the entire crowdfunding ecosystem, and it was a company called Synergy, and they were busted. One of the reasons they were busted is because they were doing it online, and people figured it out pretty quickly, and most of the money was recouped. That's the only time of any fraud that I'm aware of. Now, in regarding to private placements, the old way they do it, that's just a constant hailstorm of fraud. It's like every week you read about some sort of cool fraudster that scams some people, and it's terrible, but I think doing it online creates more transparency and credibility. Still very much the early days. I know a lot of people say, you know, I want to invest in Uber and be in the next Uber. That's not reality. When you buy equity, it's a long haul. It's, you know, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years. Debt, which is Young Grow, Next Seed, that's different. His platform is paying people out now, and I know he's going to talk about that, and I think it's really quite cool. Liquidity is important. People need to have an opportunity, an option to get out of these investments at some point in time. Somebody was talking about local exchanges. That's one way. I think there's going to be a technological solution where people are going to figure that out. And you're already seeing that in the UK. Cedars, one of the largest UK equity crowdfunding platforms, has created their own secondary marketplace. And it's doing well. I mean, it's doing well. It's working. And they're doing their own exchange in-house. I love it. It's great. And obviously, success will breed success. And so Amy is telling me to get off the stage. I just, you know, in brief, banks don't really want to back an early stage company because it's too risky. That's a fact. Innovation counts. And where does innovation come from? It comes from small business. You know, 0.02% of the companies are publicly traded companies in this country. We're a nation of small business and entrepreneurs. We need to support that. And not every, you know, startup's going to become a unicorn, and that's okay. I mean, come on. You know, and backing the businesses you believe in. I truly embrace and believe this. I think that everybody should be given the option and opportunity to support a business that they believe in their community, or maybe it's across the country. And I think that's the power and the potential of investment crowdfunding, and that's why I'm here. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Amy. I'm all done.